Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hafadades Antero, welcome to your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. Today we're listening in on the first of a number of anticipated shows featuring speakers from the third Marianas History Conference held on September 1st and 2nd here in Saipan. The conference was first conceived back in 2011 by the University of Guam, Guampedia, Guam Preservation Trust, and the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. And they agreed to have a biannual history conference with the theme One Archipelago, Many Stories, which would help to reintegrate a historical narrative that diverged nearly 120 years ago when our islands were divided as a result of the Spanish-American War. Well, this was the third conference, and one of the speakers was Dr. Rosalind Hunter Anderson. Dr. Hunter Anderson began her fieldwork in 1980 in Yap and has practiced archaeology in the Carolines, the Southwest Islands of Palau, and the Marianas for over 30 years. Within Micronesia, the Southern Mariana Archipelago stands out for the quantity and variety of its rock art, painted and incised on the dark walls of caves and rock shelters. Here now is Dr. Rosalind Hunter Anderson speaking on two approaches to Marianas rock art, culture history, and anthropology.
Good day, everybody. I'm very privileged to be here. Thank you very much for coming and for listening to me. I would like to share some thoughts I've had about how archaeologists have approached the study of rock art here. And I would like to also share my thoughts about what you as consumers of the information and I as a practitioner may be learning from all our efforts. First, I'd like to start with some rhetorical questions. Do you care whether the claims made by archaeologists are true, according to scientific standards? Is it even possible to learn very much about past cultures by studying old remnants left behind many centuries ago? Perhaps you just prefer a good story about what happened in the past, and never mind the science. How about a good archaeological story based on good science? Ideally, these go together. But here's what's troubling me. The ancient Chamorro story, told in the local media and in scholarly publications, is far too simple and maybe even wrong. Does this matter? If it does, and I think it does, archaeologists need to start asking different questions. Not just the basic, descriptive what, where, and when questions to characterize archaeological sites and their assemblages. Yes, these basic questions are an essential part of research, but archaeology that focuses on ever more detailed descriptions never seems to get around to the more interesting ones that can be asked of the data. I'm talking about those why questions, the ones that animate the work of scientists. Is archaeology a science? Or is it history? Or is it both? Here in the Marianas, prehistoric archaeology is firmly in the history camp, judging by what one sees on TV and reads in the scholarly literature. The archaeological history of Chamorro culture started out with a bare plot outline: migration, settlement, and population growth. Now, It is a full-fledged, heroic origin narrative with many details about life during the prehistoric past, including the fact that rice was cultivated here prehistorically. Yet, just as in real history, alternative narratives also occur in archaeology. Are they all equally valid? Is there a way to judge among them? In the culture history approach, the narrative comes first, which then guides further research. An acceptable culture history narrative must be coherent, factual, and its events and actions have to comport with the listener's beliefs about how the world works, and especially about what culture is. Speaking of beliefs, I will never forget what happened to me at an archaeology conference a few years ago. I had just finished giving my paper, which was an explanatory model that involved cultural ecology. After the session, a small group of people standing near me included an eminent archaeologist of the culture history persuasion. Clearly bothered by my paper, he looked me in the eye and said, "Roz, I just don't believe you." I was taken aback, of course, but later I realized that my colleague had judged my work by the culture history belief criterion. My model did not comport with his beliefs about the way the world works. Therefore, it wasn't an acceptable story. Now, the methods of culture history in prehistoric archaeology are clearly different from real history, since written sources are unavailable. So, certain artifacts take their place as silent informants. The focus is on the iconic ones that identify the culture under study and help trace changes in that culture over time. In order to get the story straight, the culture historian needs accurate dates for the main events or turning points in the story. In the Marianas, migration is the event that starts the story. Culture historians endlessly dispute about when precisely the migration occurred. Was it 3,500 years ago? 4,000 years ago? 4,500 years ago? There are adherents to each of these dates. Culture historians here also are very concerned with cultural kinship, identifying the parent culture of the migrants. The assumption is that people carry the iconic artifacts of their parent culture with them when they relocate. So the culture historian pays closest attention to those artifacts that help identify the culture that was carried from the home village to the new one. This has led to comparisons of culture identity markers in early Marianas artifact assemblages with those known from elsewhere of comparable age. While dating of cultural deposits is not always straightforward and is subject to intense technical arguments and discussions, cultural kinship is even more contentious. Marianas redware, ceramics, and marine shell ornaments are considered the ethnic identifiers at early sites here. But these items are so common throughout island Southeast Asia and coastal New Guinea that a single origin point for the Marianas migrants cannot be agreed upon. So the debate goes on, with some favoring Luzon, others Borneo, etc. The cultural kinship part of the Chamorro story is still a bit unclear. Later parts of the story involve an expansion of settlement into the island interiors and changes in subsistence. Lachi period sites are by far the most numerous and have yielded so much material that the museums have a problem of what to do with it. My ears are still burning from when an exasperated historic preservation official, fed up with reading technical reports, I suspect, remarked, "We already know all about the Lottie period, so why do we need more excavations?" Why indeed? Well, one answer is that culture history stories can be improved by new excavations using new investigative techniques. Stories about the past also satisfy public curiosity, and they can boost tourism when presented properly, or appropriately, I should say. Most importantly, the Chamorro story, based on archaeology and on historical documents, validates and privileges local cultural heritage. A source of pride and political force, the story of Chamorro culture supports legal and moral arguments in favor of protection of natural resources as well as cultural landscapes and cultural heritage sites. In the context of ongoing conflicts with government and private interests, culture histories are empowering. The downside of a culture history approach is that the story's structure and its vocabulary, with its own particular semantic connotations, leaves little room for surprises, aka scientific discoveries. For that, you need research that is problem-motivated. By problem-motivated research, I mean doing archaeology as anthropology. Anthropology as a frame of reference for archaeology includes a wealth of ethnographic knowledge about cultures of tropical islands, for example. It also includes the findings of ethnoarchaeology, which can reveal the distinctive archaeological signature of a given culture. The upside of anthropologically informed archaeology is that it can make culture history stories more interesting and more compelling. So, coexistence is a good thing. Now, what about the recent studies of rock art in the Marianas? Is there a story yet? More than one? Has a research problem been identified? The rock art in the caves at Retivian in northern Guam has rightly come to the public's attention for its great variety in form, color, and location, in dark caves mostly. The hard disconnect between the cultural past and the present has made these images just as enigmatic to the Chamorros today as they are to everybody else. Now this year, the Retivian caves and their rock art have been described in great detail, along with nearby archaeological features, in a study published in the journal Antiquity.
Dr. Rosalind Hunter Anderson speaking on 2 approaches to Marianas rock art.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. We're listening in on a presentation made at the 3rd Marianas History Conference on September 1st and 2nd, 2017 in Saipan. Here now is Dr. Rosalind Hunter Anderson speaking on 2 approaches to Marianas rock art, culture history, and anthropology.
For the first 2,000 years, which is the majority of the graph, rock art is found to have been possible, my blue boxes. And for the last 1,000 years, not just possible, but certain. Those are the red enclosed statements. Now this figure is not a scientific model, although it involves systematic observations and scientific principles, like radiocarbon dating and marine geology. It is an abbreviated culture history whose remit is to describe, and describe some more. The result is a detailed characterization of the archaeological features near to the caves with pictographs. But despite all the descriptive work, the rock art remains unique, mysterious, undated, and unexplained. Having facts, such as spatial associations among archaeological features and rock art at Titian, is essential for meaningful research. The approach is culture history, whether the approach is culture history or anthropology. It is what we do with the facts that separates cultural historians from anthropologists of the past. The possibilistic tendency, all those statements that maybe rock art was possible here and possible next and next, it appears to come from the assumption that culture is a set of ideas. People choose their ideas from the great arc of possibilities available to the human mind. Human choices, then, are what create cultural differences and similarities. It's a theory. Given human psychology with its unpredictability, it's a waste of time to try to explain cultural variations. Therefore, anything is possible, and it's sort of like an anything goes theory of culture. Well, I rather disagree with that, because there is another more productive way to think about culture. One can assume, for instance, that cultural phenomena like hunting and gathering, agriculture, fishing, dancing, making love, making spear points, are all manifestations of natural processes that can be discovered. Anthropology has made some progress in this area. We are special, but not that special, at least biologically. Now here is an alternative definition of culture that provides a more useful starting point from which to study archaeological remains. Culture is our species' extrasomatic means of adaptation, outside the body. It is based on our unique human ability to arbitrarily assign meanings to things that exist, and even to those that don't. This unique human trait is called symboling, the ability to symbol. As a complex system of adaptation, culture has several interacting components. The main ones are technology, that's the basis, sociology, and ideology, which follow. These interacting components affect each other, sometimes drastically. If the uneasy balance in a cultural system exceeds established tolerances, the culture is likely to change, some say to evolve. In this view of culture, rock art is the material expression of the sociological and ideological components and processes that operated at the time the rock art was created. What were the adaptive conditions that favored creation of rock art in the Marianas? Well, we do have some clues. Even without a complete inventory of rock art sites, we know where rock art tends to occur, mostly in dark caves where people don't live. Some rock art occurs at remote caves, far from settlements. I suspect we haven't found all of them, although they are rare. Variability in the location of rock art sites is provocative to an anthropologist like me. What might be the adaptive context, the adaptive conditions that gave rise to the use of remote sites for rock art creation? Fortunately, ethnographers working throughout the world have provided hints about adaptive conditions and rock art in remote locales. For example, in Aboriginal Australia, remote cave rock art is renewed every generation by clan initiates. The overlapping images are mnemonic devices that help the elders remember and the young initiates retain and pass on, when they become elders, the important legendary knowledge of the clan, knowledge that respects and validates claims to critical resources. Why has this practice developed? These Australian populations live under conditions of demographic packing, and long ago they worked out a clever means of avoiding overt and destructive competition. Rock art helps to maintain territorial boundaries through respect for tradition. Now, I'm not going to try to solve all the other puzzles about Marianas rock art today, but I would like to tell you what happened when I went after some missing information from the Guam rock art database. Here's the short version. How am I doing on time? Still okay? I can't see your fingers, so sorry. I knew that there were two large rock art localities with high diversity in image types. Both are in Guam. One is the limestone cave complex at Richijan, and the other is at Malak Pictograph Cave in the southern hills. Richijan was off limits, so I focused on Malak, also known as Bird Cave, from the Guam swiftlets who nest there. Here's the entrance to the pictograph chamber. Previous archaeological work at the site had found several different colored pictographs there. Naturally, I wanted to know what they were made of, as well as when they were made. For this, I needed a chemist, specializing in analysis of ancient pigments on cave walls. In 2008, I found him by chance, while we were both visiting colleagues at the University of New Mexico. His name is Marvin Rowe. I was very lucky that day. Marvin is internationally renowned for inventing a new technique for the elemental analysis of pigments that uses very small samples. Once I had described the situation at Malak, he immediately agreed to advise me how to take very small samples of paint without disturbing the integrity of the images. And he would analyze the samples at his lab at Texas A&M Cotter, if I could get the funding. What a nice man. The far-seeing and scientifically astute Guam Preservation Trust provided me a small grant for the fieldwork phase in 2011 and another in 2012 for the analysis phase. In 2013, the GPT provided a third grant for scholarly publication, conference papers, and an educational brochure for use in island schools and libraries. I've got copies of the brochure here, in that envelope there, for anyone who's interested in seeing it or taking one. Malak Pictograph Cave, the red dot, formed millions of years ago in a very old limestone outcrop. It is 650 feet above sea level. Nearly equidistant from both coasts, the site is on Navy land. It is protected because of the endangered Guam swiftlets, and this protection has also prevented vandalism at the site. The pictographs are high up on the west wall, marked in orange. There is no natural light. The air inside the cave is cool and dry, probably helping to preserve the images. There are no cultural deposits in the pictograph chamber, which is the far one on the right. The previous excavations under the rock overhang at the other end of the cave yielded evidence for short-term encampments. The deposits were dated to the late Latte period, 1405 to 1604. Given these dates, it seemed likely that pictographs were made during that time. One fine morning in 2011, my Navy escorts, an archaeologist and a biologist, and I hiked for about an hour up to the site, and then we climbed down into the dark cavern. The lights from our flashlights revealed the pictographs. Balanced on a high, narrow ledge to get close enough to the images, I carefully removed small flakes of paint from the 6 of them. I labeled them S1 to S6 in red there. I selected 2 black, gray ones, 2 red, brown ones, and 2 white ones. Then I took these photos. Marvin's analysis found that the brown pigments were made from different soil components, and that the white pigment was probably slate lime, awful, in Chamorro. Only samples 1 and 2 contain bits of charcoal. Sample 1 was too small, not enough carbon in the sample for a date, unfortunately. The image is fainter and more complex in form than sample 2, which did have enough carbon for a date. Here's the calibration graph of sample 2's result. To my surprise, sample 2's calendar date was 590 to 660 CE, within the late pre-Lati or transitional or Hutzong period, depending on whose chronology is used. Not Lati period, but not very early either. The point is that the pigment date did not meet initial expectations, being about 800 years older than the rock shelter deposits at the other side. Stranger still, no sites of similar age occur anywhere in this rugged area. The anomalous date from sample 2 had generated a puzzle, a research problem that asks why. To pursue a solution, I suggest 2 steps to start with. Confirm that the sample 2 date is not a one-off result, so more black images from Malak should be dated. We might be surprised again if they are different from the first one. Then make an island-wide inquiry into the dating of black pictographs. Clearly of interest would be the dates on the black images at Retijan. And even though it isn't a remote site, it would be an interesting datum to have. For that matter, what about the dates of the black images at Chugai Cave in Rhoda? Is there an archipelago-wide consistency in these dates? Such information could help to determine the range of variation of Marianas black-painted images, a starting point for hypothesis formation and testing. Was intergroup competition for inland resources increasing just prior to the Lati period? Were new groups entering the island? Or was population increasing naturally? What about the conditions favoring the white paint images that tend to occur in small coastal caves open to the sea? Community-based ethnographic research among fishermen in Saipan has already provided some information that could pertain to an understanding of those sites. Maybe we need a rock art typology. We can do this once a complete inventory is conducted. I hope someday that Guam and the CNMI historic preservation interests will co-sponsor such a project. I told the after story of my project at Malak, Pictograph Cave, to show how an anomalous finding can ignite problem-motivated research. To me, that is the excitement and the promise of prehistoric archaeology in the Marianas. Zizus Maasin, thank you all for listening, and now let's do the Q&A.
We hope you've enjoyed our exploration today into the topic of 2 approaches to Marianas rock art, culture, history, and anthropology, as presented by Dr. Rosalind Hunter Anderson at the 3rd Marianas History Conference in September 2017 in Saipan. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.